Hello and welcome to the Service Table Podcast, episode number 2. Today we're going to be talking about what is meditation. Joining us today are our co-hosts Trung and Hang, and I'm Lloyd. So, guys, meditation, man, it's what we do. What's it about?
Oh,
Ooh.
so many definitions, so many ideas.
Well, okay, so oftentimes there's people speak of traditions, right? Different lineages of meditation that comes from different areas, right? How does that relate to meditation in general, and why are there so many different kinds of meditation practice?
Well, I think when I first started meditating, I was just I was just doing stuff just to do it. Just like, oh, this looks like maybe it'll help me. Because I'm like always thinking all the time. So I just thought, okay, just observe my breath and then wherever the mind goes, just let it go. And I thought that that was the practice. I did that. I did that for some time, and I think, yeah, like a lot of people meditate, or at least for me, it was to just be more myself and less critical. I think that's what it was. Less critical minded of who I am and what I do and judging myself and things like that. So then, I mean, as you know, I found Vipassana, or Vipassana found me, and a lot of trial and error because I think getting into this meditation, and let me know if I'm going on a tangent. Um,
You're good,
No, you
man.
good?
I started doing Vipassana, and I think it's also starting off incorrectly because this technique is such a deep practice, and there's so many ways it can go wrong, and really honing down the foundation, which is the sila, the samadhi, the panya, especially the sila. I think that wasn't as pure, and now it's like as it's cultivating, it's like okay, well, okay, I'm really experiencing what it means to be quote unquote happy, little by little, as opposed
Okay.
to chasing. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get into what Sila, Samadhi, and Panya are a little bit later in this episode. But what is, like you said, Vipassana? Like, just really quickly, if you could sum it up in 2 or 3 words, or like a one sentence, like what is Vipassana? Um,
Vipassana is just constantly being aware of the changing nature. I would
okay.
say that would be the easiest way to.
Same to you, Tron. What is Vipassana to you?
Yeah, Vipassana has been translated to insight meditation or gaining wisdom in a sense. And the insight that you're supposed to receive is the laws of nature or the ultimate truth, which is, impermanence, no non-self, and what is this unsatisfactoriness of, that we're experiencing in life.
Okay. So all of that sounds very philosophical, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we can get more into that as well. But really, the question is, as a just what, like, a lot of our audience is going to wonder, like, what do I do? Like, yes, I can get into like what this is about, and we're not going to necessarily be teaching them, but what is meditation for them? Uh, just kind of understanding what we're doing, like what are we actually doing without the philosophical. Uh, yeah.
So, why are we getting into this thing anyways, this thing called meditation? There's a reason why we're looking for something, right? Like we're looking for, kind of like what Heng said, oh, my mind is so busy, I'm looking for maybe being a little bit more calm or more peaceful, whatever the word might be, right? But if you look at it at the deepest level, it's just, self-love. Like you're looking a way to love yourself more by not feeling so distracted by the mind or making or reacting in a way that might harm you and others, right? You're trying to find this sense of being, right? So it is, I think it is a practice of self-love in some ways. For me, especially, and we talked about this in the last episode, being gentle with yourself, but also being strict with yourself, finding this balance of self-love, like what is good for you in this moment. And maybe you don't know, so you try this and try that. But this is part of becoming your own master and truly loving yourself as best as you can, which is the practice. So meditation also is, sitting with yourself, seeing what is really happening right now, and embracing it, and being able to observe it in that way because you are in a quantum state possibly. So yeah, it's a interesting experience, and kind of like what Heng said. I'm just gonna chime in one more thing. Like, it's you could be doing it wrong. It can be very complicated, but the explanation of how to meditate is very, very simple. It's really my own mind that's getting in the way of just doing what they're telling me to do, literally. Like, it's like if you don't you can't understand it because you don't want to understand it almost. So it's not possible almost. It doesn't feel that in that way. But yeah, I like what Hank said, and I just wanted to chime in on that.
Very nice. And yeah, same to you, Hang. So like if you were kind of to like tell people what we're doing without, breaking it down too far, like what is meditation in a very broad, like what do you do? Like not on the philosophical end, but what can they expect?
Oh man. What can we expect? I think expecting ourselves to be more calm, more, or I would say less thoughts, having less thoughts, little by little, decreasing it, and in turn, getting that monkey mind, quote unquote, out of the way of this practice that Trung was mentioning. That
What is the monkey mind?
the monkey mind is just the mind that's constantly grasping on to any thoughts or ideas, emotions, and it's just changing, just branch after branch. It's trying to hold on, and we're eliminating that, or we're trying to at least slow it down so that we can know what's going on, because sometimes we just get lost in thought. It'll just like, oh, what do I do? Getting anxious, or sometimes even depressed because our mind is constantly thinking of the future or the past. And now we're trying to just be present.
So I know in a lot of like say Japanese traditions, they'll talk about empty mind, right? Does that relate to monkey mind, and what is the difference? And is that something that one should strive for in their practice?
I think that it's great. It's great. The empty mind. It's the Japanese way. I think there's nothing. There's it's there for a reason. So the practice, and the reason we try to experience this empty mind is because in order to be quote unquote enlightened, we have to be aware of, or at least experience all aspects of the mind. So if we haven't experienced what it's like to have an empty mind, I don't think we can ever be enlightened.
Okay. So Trunk, can you chime in on that a little bit too? Like and I know this isn't necessarily in line with, like, so there's different traditions. Like you have the Japanese traditions, you have the Chan traditions, you have Indian traditions, you have any number. I'm sorry.
There's like traditions in traditions, so it's endless.
Yeah.
Let's say we have our own tradition of this tradition. So now I get it. Like it's again the mind or the ego in this case, yeah. But the mind is not something I don't think we should eliminate, because we always have this mind, right? It's almost like coming to terms with, oh, this is just what's happening. And I think that's really what the practice is of Vipassana is. This is something that's just happening. I don't have to feel bad or good about whatever it is. because that's just what's happening. And and that understanding might allow someone to be able to observe and go through that emotion, let's say, or this sensation, or this mind, whatever you want to call it, because the mind is creating the sensation, kind of what Hank said, like you start thinking this thought and then you feel a certain way. So emotions.
So we all practice. We're Vipassana practice. We all practice Vipassana, which is mindfulness. Can you guys go into what mindfulness is for the listener? Like, let them, because that's really the people use this term all the time and say, "Oh, I got to be more mindful of the people that I'm interacting with, or I got to be more mindful of various situations." They're kind of just entered the modern vocabulary. And so what is it from a meditation standpoint? What is mindfulness? Why do we practice Vipassana?
Well, as far as this practice goes, the mindfulness, there's so many ways to begin. And I think that with this practice, it's just, I would say, a more general way that most people can start. And that is just being aware of the breath. For some, it might be more difficult to start with the breath, or the natural breath, quote unquote, where it's just because the breath can either be voluntary or involuntary. So we're working on that involuntary, or at least try to. If we can't work with involuntary, we go voluntary or even harder. But the involuntary breath, so that we can be aware of this unconscious or subconscious mind. And that's the goal, to be aware of these little parts of the mind that we might not be aware of. And then we could progress further.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say, Trung? What is mindfulness to you?
Mindfulness, I mean, the quick definition online, I'm sure, is like to be present, right? Or not to be living in the past or the future. And like I'm daydreaming, fantasizing, or reliving some memory. I mean, we can be here now and actually experience life in the sense, or being. So yeah, I think that's the mindfulness practice, in terms of always, in meditation, we come back to the anchor, which it could be the natural breath or whatever, or you can call it the primary object. And in mindfulness, you're just coming back to the present, however you would do that, right? Like, oh, I'm sitting right now. Oh, I'm having a conversation right now. Like, you're coming back to this thing, like what I'm actually really doing right now. And that's, I guess, mindfulness, being present. Like, yeah.
So you spoke on like the mind coming back to this present moment. That reminded me of like a single point focus, right? Which is also another thing that people hear about in meditation, also a single point focus. Would you say that in this practice, there's like, how does that relate to practice, and why do we try to return, and like, and what happens if the mind doesn't stay singularly focused on one object? Like, what, because I think people worry about that a lot. It's like, oh, I'm not able to sit here and empty my mind or concentrate on one thing or whatever. So, which those things, like you said earlier, Trung, like emptying the
Yeah.
mind isn't necessarily the goal, but what is like the single point
Yeah.
of
So just to go back to that, all these things are just concepts, right? Like,
yeah.
like empty mind, or no mind, or whatever, all these different things that people have a perception of, or the way they express how to experience this thing. But the reality is, we're continually coming back, becoming more focused, which is the one pointedness, right? I mean, that one point can be anything. It's just a place where you can become concentrated, and it's the primary object, so you can come back to it and continually practice that until you're there in this one point, let's say, whatever you're focusing on. And then maybe if you're observing this natural breath as your anchor, then maybe suddenly you can actually see what this natural breath is because you're so concentrated, right? And then that gives you some maybe experience that makes you realize that, oh, this is possible or this is not possible. Oh, who knows, right? Because until we experience it directly, then we don't know if it's actually true for us, right? So everything else is just theoretical or intellectual. And to get that one-pointedness, and I might be going in deeper, but when you get this in this state of concentration, there's no more space for thoughts, let's say. That's kind of like becoming the master of your mind, and you become equanimous. So in that point, and maybe these are big words, equanimous just means you won't be reactive anymore. And you'll just be able to go through this sensation and observe it as clearly as possible because there's no space for anything else to come in but you watching this breath or whatnot. So yeah, it's many layers, and people I'm just explaining based on how I understand it. Just like someone would say, oh, this is what empty mind is, like maybe this is what they call empty mind, right? Like, I don't know. But for me, it's not really empty. It's actually, yeah, yeah.
So you said something I found a little interesting, and I'd like Hang to kind of jump in on this. So you were saying, while we're focused on, say, the natural breath, we're able to observe things as they are, right? Like, I've heard, and we hear this throughout the practice, as it is, not things changing, not things, colored by perception. So Hang, can you touch on like what, that means? Like, what is, like, and Hang said, or Trung said this earlier also, the ultimate reality. Like, what is as it is? What does that mean, to see things as they are?
Oh man, I think that's as self-explanatory as it can be. Yet I think we all make it complicated. Because I think, yeah, I mean, with the practice, we're trying to observe it as it is, but also we have so many ideas in the past, like, what is it actually? We learn through the discourses that we watch every day. It's kind of supposed to be like this. This is how we progress on the path, but we jump ahead, and I think it's just literally as it is, like whatever is happening. Like, imagine if not even imagine, like, as it is when you're experiencing, as if nothing is there to judge it. Experience life as if there's really nothing there to judge it, and then you can really experience it as it is, because our mind is always judging, this is good or this is bad, or no, I don't want, even whatever you're experiencing in the moment when you're meditating, it's like, it's like, I don't like this, or this is great, keep it like. So I think it's just, whatever happens, don't judge it. Don't judge and experience it for what it is. Whatever is happening, moment to moment, the minuscule moment from one moment to this moment. If you really do judge it subconsciously, it's just, how did that differ from this moment to that moment? And it's not even a thought. It's just, it should almost be just automatic, because you're trying to, you're not really trying to, it's such a double-edged sword, because you're not trying to react, but if you're not trying to react, you're trying to do something, and then you're reacting. So it's like,
right. We can get into that circular,
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is how we get lost in meditation, one way. What do you think, Trung?
The reacting word is a interesting word, right? Because if we're mindful and present, then maybe it's not a reaction. Maybe it's just being, right? So there's also this discernment of, and I think it is, like I said, when you get to this place that's very concentrated, one-pointedness, you might be able to see it a little bit more clearly when you're about to shift from reacting versus it's not a reaction. Like, I don't know, I'm just giving an example. So
You
yeah,
know,
I mean,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. When you said that, it just reminded me of a friend of mine said that if you got hit with the first arrow, just try not to get hit with the second one. I don't know if that makes sense.
hmm.
As in, if you already reacted the first time, try to just not react the second time. Or if you did react the second arrow, third, fourth, and
Yeah,
continuously.
yeah.
I mean, at some point you got to move
Gotta
out the
keep
way.
suffering, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Get hit so many times. Yeah.
Hmm.
So okay, so as far as not reacting, right? Because that's something that like a lot of people I feel would struggle with as well. Um, like what is that like? Like you talked about like, and you hear these terms like flow state and things like that too. Is that, would you consider that non-reactive, or like how do like how do you not react if you have something come up, you know?
You want me to go first?
Go ahead.
Whoever someone says.
So
You-
yeah, like the whole thing with mindfulness, and again, it's this perception, oh, we're supposed to be a certain way when we do this thing, right? Like not reactive or whatever. And really the practice of mindfulness or meditation, at least to me, is just again coming back to the present moment. Like that's all that I'm that's my intention behind my practice. Like, I mean, besides self-love, but it's really just coming back to the primary object of whatever how I'm meditating at that moment, whether it's anapana or vipassana. So that's it. Like, in the sense, I'm not trying to clear my mind or get rid of anything like the monkey mind. It just happens on its own. Just a natural, it's just an organic thing that happens when I meditate. So I'm not looking to empty my mind. I'm not looking to, yeah, achieve anything really specific in that moment besides, oh, I'm here to observe the present moment. Let me keep coming back to this primary object, because I know when I do this, my mind becomes concentrated. And when my mind becomes concentrated, then I may be able to see the reality as it is, which is kind of like we said earlier, the whole sila, samadhi, panya. But yeah, it's just morality, concentration, and then wisdom. And I kind of like the stepping stones, if you can look at it that way, to get to this point where you can be, right? And yeah, that's at least my gist of it, breaking down it real simply.
Okay. Hang.
Oh man. Well, I forgot what the question was, but going on what Trunk said,
Okay.
Let's keep going, yeah.
I think that's a great way to experience it on a practical level, because I see it like this non-reactiveness. It's real. Oh,
We can
camera
still hear you.
went. Basically, the non-reactiveness. It's kind of us setting a goal from, like, when we're on the finish, like when before the race starts, or whatever competition it is, we have a goal in mind. And as if you're running a race, your goal from when you first started to the end goal, the goal is still the same, but what you're going through is different. So you kind of have to maneuver your way around the process or the path
Mm.
in this way, where the goal is right. It is to be non-reactive, or I mean, everyone's goal is different, but this path, really, the goal is to get rid of this reactiveness in the end. Get rid of this I'm about to use a big word here, sankara,
Okay.
which is basically just it's so many meanings to this, but it can mean volition, it can mean intention, it can mean the reacting part of the mind. Basically, the goal is to be aware of all of this and to not attach yourself to it. And so the process, like Trung said, that is the process, to just be concentrated, to be aware, and to understand, comprehend.
I really like what you said about the race as the metaphor. That's really good. So you start out, you're at the starting line. You're like, okay, I'm going to run this race. I'm going to get there at the end first, or whatever. I'm going to win this race, right? But then when you're in the race, you might be again focusing on your breathing, like making sure to take deep breaths and making sure your stride is right and your knees are up. So then you're not thinking about the goal, but you're just running the race and kind of walking the path. I really thought that it's a really good metaphor. I like that very much.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we get, I think that's the problem. Is like when we're in the middle of the race, sometimes we're thinking like, oh man, maybe these people are so ahead of me. Because even in the discourse, like on day 5 or something like that, going the teacher would say like, you know, we're sitting there struggling in our own mind, and then we not supposed to open our eyes, but we open a little bit, and everyone's sitting there so still, and you're like, oh my god, they're like they're ahead of me, I gotta catch up. And then the mind starts wandering and going crazy all over again,
Right.
trusting
What
the
do you think?
Um, yeah, I mean, the thought came and went, so I'm good.
There it is. So what are some of the benefits? Like, okay, so I still think we've left a little bit of like um ambiguity and as far as like what it is, right? So we talked about um just kind of the different things that will happen in the practice, right? Like, you'll have reactiveness and you'll be trying to get rid of these things. But again, like there's a saying that I've really found that comes from the martial arts that's really, really great. And they say simplicity in the hands of the master, right? So you see these little old martial artist guys that they're, 80 years old, and it doesn't look like they're doing a lot of exaggerated movement. It's simple, but they're the master, right? Simplicity in the hands of the master. Like, how could you simplify these ideas for somebody who's maybe new to the practice, or like what can they, or new to practicing meditation? What's the simplest way to think about what they're going to be getting into or what they're going to be doing?
I can go first. Um, yeah, like what's the expectation or the outcome you're gonna get or the benefit, right, of meditation? I mean, it's a process just like anything else. Like, when we choose to become physically healthier, we have certain intentions and maybe certain goals, and but the process are all the same. It takes steps. It takes the first step, one, then it takes consistency, right? And when consistency happens, you got to have faith in that, hey, if I do this every day or every week or whatever, 3 times a week, it's gonna help me in some way, right? Like 1% at a time can add up to maybe 2%, let's say, eventually. So you don't know when that's going to add up to 2%, but you're going to keep doing it because you have this faith, let's say, behind that. If I go to the gym 3 times a week, I'm going to be healthier than if I didn't go 3 times a week. Let's say that, just a basic concept. So same thing with meditation. Hey, if I believe that meditation is good for my mental health, let's say, or being more present, whatever you want to call it, not having the monkey mind all the time, or giving me this experience or this belief, and in terms of I can see this in a different way because I'm not like this all the time, let's say, right? So by doing this, whatever, 5-15 minutes a day for 3 times a day, whatever, it's just like a gym, you pick what you want to do, but that adds up and that could help you, right, in the long run. and you don't know how fast it's going to add up or all those things, but you know something good's going to happen out of it. And the important thing that they teach in at least the retreats we go to is, be aware of the benefits that you receive from your practice, because it's hard to be like, oh, you work out for 2 weeks straight and you're like, yo, I didn't see any change, I guess I'm going to stop. Same thing with meditation. You don't expect you're going to get results right away from doing 5 minutes a day for 2 weeks straight, that suddenly you're going to be like clear of all your monkey mind. So it's just, again, perception. And it is helpful that we have each other as friends to support each other, just like the gym. You have a gym buddy, like we have people to talk about it, to the things we're going through, what this really means to me, and maybe I hear something else that is helpful to me. So it's a journey, it's a process, and that's my way of seeing what this really is. But my intention is, it's going to help benefit me XYZ, and that's what I'm doing. And that XYZ can be anything for you. It could be something very deep, very shallow, who knows? But I think when you are on this path, you'll find more to it as you keep practicing. Just like the gym, like you might realize you like this specific way of working out instead. So yeah, it's just a process you get to experience. And yeah, that's it.
For sure. I like the gym metaphor was really good. So the thing about the gym, though, let's talk about this for a second, right? We tend to beat ourselves up, and you always talk about, hey, taking care, like self-love, like that's definitely something that I hear you talk about. So how do I not beat myself up if I miss a day at the gym, or if I, like a lot of people, or if I miss a day of sitting and for meditation? Like, how do you, like what do you think, Hang? How do you not beat yourself up?
So I'm gonna answer that question. I'm also answer the question you asked before that about the master.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So please, let's do that one first, and then we'll get.
No, it's okay. I think we're on this topic. So I would say to not beat yourself up is understanding what the practice is, because the practice is vipassana, which is observing changing nature within ourselves, but also, and everyone will learn this on the last day, that there's a healing process as well. There's a soothing balm that you'll have at the end of the course. And this is one of my favorite Goenka quotes. And I might butcher it. So essentially it was in one of the Q&As, they asked, how do you love yourself? And he answered, well, yeah, loving yourself, that's one of the most important things. And the best way to love yourself is to stop reacting with craving, with aversion, with ignorance. And that again goes hand in hand with the practice. As long as you're practicing, you're going to progress. But if you beat yourself up, that's running in the opposite direction. And speaking of running in the opposite direction, that's the foundation of the practice. When you become a master, you have to have the foundation down. Like, you have to be very solid in foundation when you look at these martial art masters. And so foundation of the technique is the sila, the morality. And once you have that foundation down, the path is so much easier, because the sila is what's preventing you from going against the path, from because the path is to purify your mind. So if you're doing anything that goes against morality, you're defiling the mind. That's how you continue on this path. Just maintain the foundation and don't go back. Just don't regress, and you'll progress.
I mean, we all tend to fall off a little bit. I think that's that's there's an element of like forgiveness there, right? Hey, I didn't go to the gym on Tuesday or Wednesday, so I forgive myself, and I'm gonna go again on Thursday and Friday, right? And so I think there's an element of that too, and yeah, and also just yeah, just taking account of what you did do, I think is helpful too. Like you did go to the gym today on Monday, you did get your reps in, right? So I think that's helpful too. Um, so we said we were going to talk about Sheila a little bit, and as we wrap up, and maybe we can even get this maybe a little more in depth on the next episode. So let's talk about Sheila. What is it, and why is it such a foundational element of of the practice?
Can I just chime in on the regression part? Because
Yes.
the labeling of that word is negative, right? But there's nothing
Mhm.
negative about regressing. It's just what's happening. Just like when we meditate, we feel sensation and it's happening. So regression, or that feeling or that sensation of not being good enough, or whatever you want to call it, is just an opportunity to practice. So this is when the mind can be present and not label and feel something negative that's going to pull you under, let's say. Because in
Maybe
reality,
closer.
it's just a moment happening. Oh, I feel this thing. I did this thing and now I feel this thing. And that thing is just happening. And I regress all the time. So I'm just going to say in this way. But now I regress in a short amount of time. So because I can see this feeling happening clearer, right? So I'm like, oh, it's just I'm feeling negative about this thing, and I know that thing's not gonna last because I've done this many times now, regressing. So eventually, I'm like, oh yeah, it's just because I'm punishing myself in a way, right? But with the practice of self-love again, or just being good enough, whatever you want to call that, you can rise back up. So maybe this time you fall down. And I think Wenkaji talks about this, you backtrack only a couple steps and now you can jump 10 steps ahead or whatever. And you keep doing that, you're still getting ahead. Or he talks about, oh, you may be angry for, 8 hours before, and now you notice you're only angry for 7 hours and 20 minutes. Who knows, right? So it's just noticing these changes, knowing that this is possible, and then experiencing maybe this possibility, and then that helps you shift in a way of understanding and these feelings and emotions better, right? Or less reactive, you can call it, whatever. Yeah.
That's great.
And what was
We were going to go into Sheila in a second, but
oh
I'll let
yeah,
Hank
yeah,
chime in there.
hang go for it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think with the regression part, I think it's kind of
Let's keep going on it.
Yeah, this is a good one. This is a good element because I think a lot of people don't forgive themselves, and that's why they stop practicing. Same with the gym. Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't go today, and they
we're
find that
worst
way
critic.
to. Yeah.
oh well, yeah, with regression, it's yeah, it is not. I wouldn't say it's part of the process, but it'll happen. It'll happen.
Oh, it's all part of the process, man. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? I'm sure it happens to everybody. Like, there's no way people don't regress.
Yeah.
well, yeah.
I'm just messing around. Just messing around.
Well, it's just kind of going back to the race analogy. We have this goal and we're trying to go for it, but once we're on the path, it's only looking forward from there. We can't say, "Oh man, I forgot something," or "I forgot my gear," or "Oh man, you're here. You're in the middle of the path, the running zone. So you just have to keep going." And a lot of more, I would say, either athletes or people in the military, they'll kind of understand this because this is what they've been training for their whole life, or maybe not their whole life, but a period of time in their life. And so this process, it's kind of the same thing. Like, hey, it's gonna happen. If you're in war, you know, you might, one of your friends might die, and but you can't mourn his death right now because this is getting like super violent. But
Right.
you,
The time
you
is
can't
now.
mourn his death because
You don't
you're
have
in the
time.
middle of it. Yeah, you might be next. So you have to keep going. And it's kind of, and that can be a way of, you know, practicing as well. It's like, all right, well, I'm in the middle of it. I'm practicing. I'm living this life right now. So I can't hold on to this. You know, I can't hold on to this negative feeling, this feeling of like I'm not progressing, or I'm not good enough. Some people might not feel that they're good enough to even, or worth it to be on this path. And I'm I've had these feelings myself personally, and it really does take a a lot of friends, having friends who are strong in the path and are just growing. At least externally, it looks like they're growing. So, you know, maybe I can get some advice from them. But essentially, the regression will happen, like you said, and we're trying to limit that as much as possible. And self love, it's going to help. Everything's going to help. Just try to use, and when we listen to the discourse, there's so many things that we're going to listen to and absorb, but a lot of them we're just going to throw away. But I'm sure those wisdom will come back as we keep progressing on the path.
I
So,
like how you were touching on the community aspects of of any practice, right? Of this particular of our practice, and generally speaking. And I know that our teacher talks about taking refuge in like people who have the qualities of enlightenment, right? For lack of a better term, people who are spiritual in nature, whether or not they're in the same practice with you. Like you can tell, even within certain practices, you'll have people who are not, necessarily doing not necessarily spiritual people, but they're in like, they're in the church, or they're in the practice, or they're in this thing, but they have this dichotomy, right? Where something that may or may not be good. So the community aspects that help us to keep from regressing. Can you guys, like, maybe Trunk can touch on like how, like, like the three of us is a good example. We all know each other from the practice and support one another. Can you, Trunk, touch on how, just the community aspect and taking refuge in other people, how that keeps us from regressing?
Yeah, just like anything I was saying, like even the gym buddy, right? That's kind of like community, or even saying hi to people at the gym, or having friends when you go to school. It makes school nicer. Or even, yeah, I mean, if you think about them, and this is my opinion, but most people go to work not because they like their job, but because the people that you work with, like this is kind of this understanding of a community for me, like it keeps me going. And in meditation, just having people that are like-minded, or it's like the same hobby, like you have something you can talk about and help each other, not in the sense of improving, but sharing your experience to help give different perspectives. And just knowing you going through the same struggles and being like, oh yeah, and I know what that, I think I know what you mean with that. Like, this is not that, like regression, like this is not the fun part, but it's happening to all of us because we're all imperfect, and we're all working on self-love, or understanding what love, means deeper. So it's just like a soothing balm, I guess. Like, it's like, oh, I'm doing this, and I know it's challenging, but at least I have these people I can either be around with, or talk with, or whatever, right? But you have this community that exists, right? Like, even if you don't talk to them every day, that if you did need some help or some support, or just somebody listen to you, you can reach out to them, and you can have this moment, and maybe it brings you back, or maybe it gets you out of regression. I mean, whatever, right? Like it could be a friendly reminder. Oh yeah, I just heard so and so say this, and they're going through the same thing, and like, oh, I'm doing that too, and like, oh yeah, it's just something that's happening to all of us, and this humbles yourself, and then you can be, yeah, let me just move on now, like, and that's yeah.
So with this Servers Table podcast, we have our various channels. We got YouTube. We'll probably get some Instagrams going, and we have our various Spotify and things like that they can look in the description and kind of reach and get in touch with any of us. But like, what is that community look like, Hang? Like, can you kind of like break down like where we are? Like, how is there a body of meditators? What is this Vipassana thing? Where are these Vipassana meditator people? And where can someone go to just generally practice and find a community around meditation besides our channels and stuff like that, even though we can introduce them?
Oh, I'm still looking. No.
Is that right? Well, yeah, you're on the West Coast now, right? What you got?
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. Well, being here, I actually made a substantial amount of friends on this path. Not which I feel like, oh man, now I need to like keep up with these guys, hit them up. But I think it's, as far as meeting with friends, it's the easiest way. I think it's just to organize group sits and to like, hey, let's do this. Let's sit with each other at least once a week or twice a week or something like that. And that is going to build that community more and more. Or serving, because we're all servers. That's how we met. Serving really is, I think there's nothing like it, because you're meeting these people who has just finished a 10-day course, and they're also willing to give their time so that other people can have this experience. And you just see these people and they're like, wow, these are really wonderful people who are really selfless. And yeah, it just makes you happy that now you're around these people, because it's growing on you. Because I forgot where I heard this quote from, but you're the average of the 5 people you're around. So you're around good people, I don't know, you might just become a good person. Even though now this saying good people, it can be very tricky because, well, the good people label themselves as good people, but I think maybe you guys get the gist of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so Trung, this is called the Servers Table podcast, and we all met as servers. How does that relate to? So that is kind of like the next level in the practice, right? You've gotten all this. We went through the sits. We went to the gym. We did our workout, and now we're gonna get there, and we're gonna help other people to get their workout in, right?
Yeah.
We're serving the
We're
next,
supporting them, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say it's the next level of the practice, but it's definitely another avenue of experiencing the practice, especially in the terms of more like daily life, because you're working, you're talking, you're having conflict with people, maybe even because you're talking or because you think something has to be done a certain way, even, right? Like, oh, why are you doing like this here? This is how you could do it. And this, of course, even for people who don't haven't worked in the kitchen before, it could be very challenging. Like you're a clean slate, you don't actually know, and like you don't feel like you have enough support. Like, oh, and this is not explained well. Oh, like I don't know how to hold this knife properly. I don't want to hurt myself. I mean, there's so many layers of this experience of, and I don't want to say uncomfortable, but if you have never been, it's like I always tell people, imagine a bunch of strangers coming together and work in a kitchen. Like that's pretty much kind of the gist of it, because not everybody's gonna, like, we didn't know each other at the beginning. We just worked together and served, and then we just got to know each other. And it's humbling because, again, we don't know everything and we make mistakes. But when you're in this place of practicing impermanence, it's people let things go maybe a little quicker, or maybe you're less attached to what you want because you can actually see things a little bit more slower, right? Like, so I think it's a really good opportunity. At least for me, it was a great opportunity to develop my daily practice in the sense of, being outside, hanging out with my family, going to work. Like, oh, why? Oh, yeah, this is just something I'm feeling, but you know, and when I say that, it's just becoming less reactive, kind of like what we've all talked about. Like, it's just when you slow down this thing, there's a opportunity to shift it, right? Like, oh, I'm not gonna do this like usual in this time, or maybe you do, but you've slowed down. Like there is this moment of more clarity, and that's something I work on developing. And by actually practicing in like practicing at the center and being a server, I think it's very, very helpful for me, and that's why I keep doing it, just like you guys.
Yeah. So Gwinkaji says, or I've heard it said, I'm pretty sure he said it, that selfless service is a selfish act, right? So can you guys, like, Hank, can you elaborate on what is so selfish about being selfless?
I think this is your favorite one.
It is though. You already know.
Oh, this is your favorite one. I don't know. Maybe you should elaborate on that. Maybe.
Well, okay. Okay, so yes, it is my favorite quote. The selfless service is a selfish act. And I like it because it is about the qualities like the hang that Trung was just talking about that you develop. You're more able to relate in other parts of your life and with other people by being selfless in your service. You learn patience, you learn, all these different qualities, wisdom, sustained effort, all these kind of things because you're patient. You're giving service to somebody else. I'm here because I want to help other people learn to meditate, right? I want to be a part of that process of them experiencing the benefits that I've also experienced from the practice. So by giving that service to other people, it becomes a very selfish act because you're constantly developing, you're constantly becoming a better person. And that growth is selfish, for lack of a better term, So that's why I like that quote a lot. But yeah, go ahead.
So the word selfish is, again, it's been labeled more negatively maybe in Western culture, or even in Eastern, especially in Eastern culture, now that I think about it. But selfishness, again, how can we love someone else if we don't actually know what loving ourselves really means, right? And that's kind of part of the direct experience, right? And I think another powerful thing, at least for me, is the selfishness of serving. I think just to be reminding yourself, like, oh, check in with yourself. How are you feeling while you're serving? Because if you're not feeling well, then you should ask for maybe a break or let somebody know, because you are the most important. And I think the center, at least the one we go to, they really understand that, like, the server, you guys are the most important people. I mean, the students is, again, it's kind of like that byproduct. I don't want to say it's a byproduct of, like, if you're in a good place, though, guess what? The students will also receive that harmony. And I think it's a good lesson to learn serving in terms of that word sacrifice, because I do feel like, at least for myself, and I've hear all the time from my friends, especially people who have kids, oh, I'm sacrificing for them, I'm doing, and I'm like, when I go serve, I don't want to think of it as, oh, I'm sacrificing my time or my effort. And, it is a selfish thing I'm doing. And I come back to thinking about that. Oh, yeah, it's very selfish because, and guess what? If I'm being very selfish, they're going to get the most out of it. Like, it's a weird way to kind of like what Lo was saying, right? Like, you keep improving. Well, that improvement is going to help the people around you, right? So, like, if you understand love more clearly or more deeply, then you can give it more clearly and deeply, maybe, right? So no, it's super cool, like the selfishness and how I've learned to perceive it in a deeper way. Just like anything, we learning these things more deeply and deeply, and kind of like what wisdom is, right? Seeing things from many different angles. And it's yeah, That's what we all, I guess, are doing. Really, is seeing things more at different angles, and that way we get a clearer picture of what it is.
Excellent. So as we get ready to wrap up here, we didn't get into some of the more in-depth things like Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. Maybe we can make an episode on that coming up here in the future. But what I want to just to kind of sum it up, we talked about, like the mind and how it wanders, the monkey mind. We talked about, kind of single pointedness and, how kind of staying present in the present moment and focusing on these things. We talked about some of the benefits that come from service and how that kind of brings the practice fuller into one's life. How would you, like, just generally speaking, as we wrap up here, what are like maybe your top 3 benefits that you have received from your practice or being meditating? Like, what are the top 3 things that it has done for you in your life?
So, go ahead. Well, sorry, my camera's off. My battery just died.
No worries.
But as far as the top 3 things, well, going back to the service, like when I go serve, it's definitely for me because I'm growing, and it's kind of like you're getting extra reps when someone is lifting 1,000 pounds and you're spotting them. So that's what it feels like. And as far as top 3 benefits that I've gotten from the practice, from the service, I would say is community, having a sense of purpose within the community. That's one. And a sense of purpose within oneself. Like, okay, now I know what the goal is. And 2, just more calmer. You have a habit. You create a habit for yourself to do this daily practice. And it's the micro steps that we take every day. It's what's really going to grow us in whatever path we're trying to succeed. And lastly, the daily practice itself in life gives the fruit. When you're stressed about work or when, whatever is going on. Also, I'm an actor. So when I'm in a scene or whatever, and maybe I forgot my lines, or maybe, oh man, this is a very intense scene, I don't know what to do. It's coming back to just being present and really living in that moment and just allow it to happen, whatever it is. But yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, for me, I know I had this idea that I couldn't meditate that well unless I'm at the meditation center, or I'm going on a retreat, I should say. And I was able to meditate just fine when I'm serving, like, again, little bits and pieces of perception is changing, or limiting beliefs are breaking away, right? So that's, I think, a very helpful thing that happened to me. And then another one is just to be able to be around and observe how compassionate an AT is to a student helped also change one of my beliefs that maybe I didn't think it was possible. And it helped me become more compassionate just by understanding that it's possible, let's say, and seeing it happening and feeling it, like being there live. And of course, also seeing myself progress as a server really gave me that feedback of, wow, this practice is really helping me become less reactive, or I'm shifting things that who I used to be, I'm no longer that way. So those 3 things, I think, overall really, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's more to come, but for now, these are the 3 main ones. And yeah, what about you, Lloyd? Like, what are those 3 things?
Well, one is definitely like the non-reactiveness, for sure. Like sometimes, as a matter of fact, I'll give you a good example. Yesterday I was in a Lyft in the Uber, and the driver is really nervous and skittish, and like you know, he was kind of, I think he was just being hyper aware of what he was doing, and just kind of felt his own sense of like nervousness in that moment. And normally his agitation would have made me agitated. Like, and actually I did start for a moment to get agitated. Like, man, what's up with this guy? What's up with this guy? Right. But being able to observe how I was feeling, I was able then to have empathy for him and understand that he was just really concerned about doing his job really well. So he was kind of, maybe he didn't want a bad review or whatever it may have been. So I just kind of was able to have a little more empathy for him. Whereas before I just gave him a bad review because he was acting weird. But no, I think he was acting weird because he wanted a good review or something like that. So really the non-reactive and being able to take that step back and say, what am I feeling? Now, how does that relate to things as they are in this moment? Was really helpful. And then the second thing is just like that, like Hang said, micro steps, right? Like to practice daily and regularly comes, like I actually really like, like the atomic habits kind of thing too. So the practice, because that is the foundation of my habits, right? It allows me to stack other habits on top of that very, very neatly. So yeah, so I'll make sure I get my sits in the morning and the evening, and then I'll stack in going to the gym, or I'll stack in when I'm at work, or like just makes that routine very much more fluid. That's 2, and then 3 again is definitely the community and the body of meditators. I love all you guys, man. It's great, and it's always good to link with the other people in the practice, other people on the path. That's what I like about it.
Do you love us or do you love yourself?
I love y'all. I love myself too, but I'm a little more harsh still. I haven't gotten to the level of self-love that we all strive for, but I'm definitely getting there. Time slowly but surely. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love you too, man.
I love all of us.
All right. And on that note, thank you guys for tuning in today to the Service Table Podcast. This is Lloyd. Go ahead and say goodbye to the folks.
Bye, guys.
Be happy, friends.
Until next time.
That's Trung and that's Hang. You guys, thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again. Bye.